Thank you, musicians. Would you take your Bibles with me this morning and turn in them to Exodus chapter 26? Exodus chapter 26. And would you please stand with me as we read? That's on page 66 if you're using one of the Pew Bibles. And for this morning's reading, I'll be reading verses 1 through 37. Please follow along with me as I read. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet yarns. You shall make them with cherubim, skillfully worked into them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and a breadth of each curtain 4 cubits. All the curtains shall be the same size. 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another, and the other 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another. And you shall make loops of blue on the edge of the outermost curtain in the first set. Likewise, you shall make loops on the edge of the outermost curtain in the second set. 50 loops you shall make on the one curtain, and 50 loops you shall make on the edge of the curtain that is in the second set. The loops shall be opposite one another, and you shall make 50 clasps of gold and couple the curtains one to another with the clasps, so that the tabernacle may be a single whole. You shall also make curtains of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. 11 curtains shall you make. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of each curtain 4 cubits. The 11 curtains shall be the same size. You shall couple 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves, and the 6th curtain you shall double over at the front of the tent. You shall make 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is outermost in one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is outermost in the second set. You shall make 50 clasps of bronze, and put the clasps in the loops, and couple the tent together that it may be a single whole. The part that remains of the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that remains, shall hang over the back of the tabernacle, and the extra that remains in the length of the curtains, the cubit on the one side and the cubit on the other side, shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle, on this side and that side, to cover it. You shall make for a tent a covering of tanned ram skins and a covering of goat skins on top. You shall make upright frames for the tabernacle of acacia wood. 10 cubits shall be the length of a frame, and a cubit and a half the breadth of each frame. There shall be 2 tenons in each frame for fitting together. So you shall do for all the frames of the tabernacle. You shall make the frames for the tabernacle, 20 frames for the south side, and 40 bases of silver you shall make under the 20 frames, 2 bases under the one frame for its 2 tenons, and 2 bases under the next frame for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle, on the north side, 20 frames, and their 40 bases of silver, 2 bases under one frame, and 2 bases under the next frame. And for the rear of the tabernacle westward you shall make 6 frames, and you shall make 2 frames for corners of the tabernacle in the rear. They shall be separate beneath, but joined at the top, at the first ring. Thus shall it be with both of them. They shall form the 2 corners, and there shall be 8 frames with their bases of silver, 16 bases, 2 bases under one frame, and 2 bases under another frame. You shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the frames on the one side of the tabernacle, and 5 for the frames on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the frames of the side of the tabernacle at the rear westward. The middle bar, halfway up the frames, shall run from end to end. You shall overlay the frames with gold, and shall make their rings of gold for holders and for bars, and you shall overlay the bars with gold. Then you shall erect the tabernacle according to the plan for it that you were shown on the mountain. And you shall make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet yarns of fine twined linen. It shall be made with cherubim, skillfully worked into it, and you shall hang it on the 4 pillars of acacia, overlaid with gold, with hooks of gold, on 4 bases of silver. And you shall hang the veil from the clasps, and bring the ark of the testimony in there within the veil. And the veil shall separate for you the holy place from the most holy. And you shall put the mercy seat on the ark of the testimony in the most holy place. And you shall set the table outside the veil, and the lampstand on the south side of the tabernacle opposite the table. And you shall put the table on the north side. You shall make a screen for the entrance of the tent of blue and purple and scarlet yarns and fine twined linen, embroidered with needlework. And you shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia and overlay them with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold, and you shall cast 5 bases of bronze for them. May the Lord add his blessing this morning to the reading of his word. You may be seated. My son, Bo, walked in the office this morning, and as he walked in, he said, "Dad, there doesn't seem to be as many people here today." And I said, "Well, it's Memorial Day weekend." I said, sometimes people travel and do stuff on the weekend. He goes, "So does that mean the service is going to be shorter?" And I said, "Is that asked like, oh man, is the service going to be shorter? Or is that asked like, oh, is the service going to be shorter?" He said, "More or less." We're considering this morning the details of the tabernacle, the measurements, the colors, the proportions that each section gets. And I titled the sermon, God in the Details, because we're familiar with the opposite phrase of that. Do you know what I'm playing off of? When you get some sort of insurance plan or you set up some vacation plan and you just get royally taken advantage of, and what your friend will quickly say to you in that moment is, well, the devil's in the details, the fine print, as it were. But this morning we're looking at God's details, and what should we expect to find there? If you don't know, I'll tell you. Glory. Glory. The devil's details take advantage of you, put you in the pit, in the gutter. God's details lead you to glory. That's the difference between the two. We have to understand that God's tent receives more attention than creation itself. Think about that. This gets more attention than creation. In the book of the law, the first 5 books of the Bible, creation gets 1 chapter. The whole cosmos gets 1 chapter. The tabernacle gets umpteen chapters. And then when you go into the prophets, it gets more and more and more and more. This is God's way of saying, this is noteworthy. It's worthy of your fullest meditation. And I'll tell you to meditate on it day and night. Why? Because the tabernacle is a piece of heaven come to earth. It's a little piece of heaven taken and put on the earth. And the whole mission of creation is to connect heaven and earth. That's the whole point. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then he begins to detail how the earth needs to change. But the heavens never get any more attention. Why? Because the heavens, that's not the sky. The sky gets created later in the creation narrative. The first heavens is the heavens. It's God's heavens. Don't read that like it's the atmosphere. It's not. The atmosphere isn't created yet. It gets created later on in the text. This is the heavens. It's God's domain. So it doesn't get any more attention. It doesn't need development. It doesn't need progression. It is perfect. It's ready-made. No tweaking necessary. But earth needs to be mirrored with heaven's image. And so the tabernacle is a piece of heaven put on the earth, and it's meant to have a ripple effect, like a seed that grows until it takes over the whole garden in a mighty tree where the birds come and take their shade and the rest. That's what this is. That's what this is. The tabernacle is a seed of heaven that is meant to grow exponentially until it takes over the planet. And guess what? We're part of that right now, are we not? We're sitting here miles and miles, thousands away from where this was first spoken. It's happening. It's happening in our midst. So we're told to meditate on it day and night, this law. Why? Well, what you have to understand, and you probably already do, is that architecture communicates priorities, value, does it not? Think about that for a moment. Houses are being built, and very frequently, the front porch isn't that big a deal anymore. Why? Because that's kind of fallen off the map. People don't talk to the people walking in their front yards as much as they used to. So front porch aren't a big deal. Dining rooms, not as big a deal as they used to be. There's not much entertainment going on. But what got bigger has been entertainment rooms, right? You know, with the movie theater and that sort of thing. That got bigger because we like entertainment, right? Architecture communicates values, but it's done in a beautiful sort of way, right? We all want our homes to be beautiful. So it communicates value and beauty. In other words, architecture is a form of art. It's a piece of art. And architecture has a blueprint, right? That's where you start. But we don't frequently think of art having a mathematically broken down blueprint, a proportional blueprint. Let me give you an example here. This is one of my favorite, I guess I could say. It's hanging at a centerpiece in my office. Is a Rembrandt's picture of the return of the prodigal. Okay, and so you may not be able to see it perfectly here, but I'll try to do my best in talking you through it. And we've talked through this before, so I won't spend a lot of time. But Rembrandt sought to depict the message of the return of the prodigal son. And one of my favorite authors, Henry Nouwen, spent 3 days in St. Petersburg, Russia, meditating on this picture. This picture is 20 feet by 20 feet big, so it's huge, right? And so the museum gave him, unlimited access to it, so he just sat before it, no interruptions, and just observed it. And in his observation, he noticed things. And the book's called The Return of the Prodigal by Henry Nouwen. I highly recommend it. I've given it to many people. So it's a really important book in my life. And so what he notices, I'll just mention a few things, is he notices that the father's hands, the father's hands on the prodigal's back are the brightest, lightest, greatest concentration of light in the whole picture, is on the father's hands. He notices that the elder brother's hands, in contrast, whereas the father's are wide open and bright and light, the elder brothers are dark and they're clasped tightly. One is a forgiving posture. One is a tight reserving of forgiveness posture. He notices in similar fashion that the father's shroud or cloak here is wide open, as if to say it's receiving, right? It's open, it's accepting. The elder brother's, in contrast, is very tight to his body. It's really close to his body, as if to say, you will not find acceptance here. Then he notices that Rembrandt chose to picture the elder brother at a higher elevation, right, than the father and the youngest brother. And so the elder brother, since he's higher, his looking down is more notable. He's looking down at a steeper slope, as is the father, so to speak. And so these little things communicate the message that's in the parable of the return of the prodigal son, right? But here's what I want you to think about. What if, instead of looking at the painting, you had someone who writes like lawnmower manuals? Okay, somebody's got that job. Somebody writes computer manuals, right? Somebody does that for their whole living. They do that, right? You don't know them. That's what they do all day long, right? Imagine if one of those guys did that to this painting and said, the web of the Father's fingers shall be this many centimeters or this many inches wide. And the tips of his fingers between his pointer finger and his middle finger shall be this many inches wide. And da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And you read that. Would that be challenging? It would be very challenging, right? I mean, it might be a manual this thick to communicate a 20 by 20. And he says, okay, now the palette, the color scheme. You know, I want this percentage of this amount to be white, brilliant white. But then I want this much yellow to be mixed in with the brilliant light to communicate a gold. But he doesn't tell you to communicate gold. He just says, do it, right? Do you see the difficulty of understanding art written in mathematical dimension? Do you see the challenge that you'd encounter? Well, friends, that's what you just heard. And that's why you couldn't probably wait for me to be done and you could sit down. Because it's just like, okay, whatever. I mean, okay. I'm sure it matters somehow. I just don't really know how. But this, and thinking of it in mathematical form, should tell you that if you did everything that computer book writer told you to do, and you put it on a canvas, according to the measurements that he told you to do, you would end up with this. And once you got to this, you would begin to understand why these proportions matter. Amen? You would. You would. Once it got here, you'd say, now I get it. Okay, so my mission this morning is to essentially assist us in doing that, okay, with God's tent, the tabernacle. Now, I want to say at the very outset that I am extremely indebted and highly recommend, if you want to dig deeper into these things, the authors of Peter Lightheart, James Jordan, Alistair Roberts, and Ross Blackburn. Extremely helpful. If you want to dig further, I can direct you in that direction. But so much of what you'll hear today is just regurgitated from these men who are like monks in the law of God and give it the attention that it deserves, and then they spill forth the blessing. And so I'm like a puppet mouthpiece of these guys, and I want you to know that from the outset. Okay, but where I want to start is I want to start with giving you the outline of this morning. We've got 3 points. The second point is 7 points, so don't be intimidated by that. It'll go quickly, I promise. But the purpose is the first point. The purpose of the Exodus, that's what we want to start with, to remind ourselves of that. And then his importance, as in God's importance, times 7. It's communicated at least 7 ways in the art of the tabernacle, okay? The art of God's tent. And then finally, I want to consider that this is our only hope. It's the world's only hope. We got a lot going on in our country, do we not? Our news is flooded with absolute tragedy, misery, insanity, and we're about to enter a month that's just going to get crazier. And this is our only hope. So please, don't talk politics. Don't talk anger. Don't talk what reforms need to be had. Just don't do it. That's all man stuff. It's all man stuff. God and pursuing Him like a treasure hidden in the field that someone was so excited, they found it, they buried it, went and sold all that they had and went and bought that. That's our hope. Jesus is our hope. The life of a country, C.S. Lewis says, is as the life of a gnat to God. I remember in college or seminary seeing a professor hold up a river map of nations and how nations swelled when they gained influence and power. And then it was they came to the trickle of a stream when someone overtook them. That's what nations look like to God. He sees us on like a photo negative, and He sees all of this. And America's big, and America's small, and this and that. And Rome's big, Greece is big, Persia's big. All these things, they're big. Babylon's big, and then it's small. And it's. You know what's always the steady? Who's the same yesterday, today, and forever? God, His Son, Jesus. So focus on Him. And this is the tabernacle's message. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag right now. His importance, recognizing His importance, is the whole message of God's tent. And I'll hopefully demonstrate that today in spades. Okay. And then finally, it's our only hope. We got there. So let's start with the purpose. Now, as I just mentioned, the purpose of God's tent is to demonstrate that He's incomparably high. He's incomparably lofty. You can't even think of something to compare Him to. The authors of Scriptures will try, and the mountain is the best that they can come up with, in a sense. And it's the best image God gives, as it were. But this is the idea. God is the point of the Exodus. And we shouldn't be surprised at this. He says to Pharaoh, I'm doing all this that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. This is your purpose clause. If you want to know what the Exodus is about, if you want to know what the tabernacle is about, it is about this. That you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. That's the point. And that's the point He wants you to meditate on day and night. And so He's given you multiple angles through which you can view that truth through His tent. This is the idea. Remember, God did not free Israel from Egypt so that they could just be a free nation in the pursuit of happiness. That's not why He did it. To free Israel from Egypt so that they could just be a free nation in pursuit of happiness, namely America, if they did that, you know what that would lead to? Well, it would lead to us. Are we enviable? Turn on the news. We're not enviable. We're a laughingstock. This is not enviable what's happening here. There may have been portions of time where we had good things. Those are fading quickly. It's fading. America is not our hope. America is a nation that's been given unbelievable freedom to itself, to pursue its definition of happiness. And we are rapidly seeing what that leads to. It's a happiness in man's image. It's a happiness in the image of man. And what does that lead to? You're free. Israel was freed from one captivity into another. We've said this before. Freeing Israel from Egypt was the easy part. Freeing Israel from Israel was the hard part. It takes 40 years and until Jesus Christ to free Israel from Israel. And frankly, they're still not free, Israel. They're still captives to themselves. So, the Exodus was not about freeing Israel so that they could have the Declaration of Independence. That's not the point. The point is where He takes them after the liberation out of Egypt. And where is that? He takes them to Sinai. And even before that, what does He say? Pharaoh, God says, the Lord. Who's the Lord? You'll find out soon enough. But He says, let my people go that they may worship me, that they may serve me, that they may avad me, which is to serve and worship. It's exactly what Adam and Eve were to do in the garden, to avad the garden. This is why they were freed. They were freed to worship. So they're freed from Egypt and they're brought to a mountain. And at that mountain, they will now be taught how to worship because that's why they were freed. They go from one captivity that leads to misery to another captivity that leads to true freedom in God's presence. And they'll be like birds flying in the air. They're so free. And you're like, that's kind of a random thought to just throw in there. Just wait. All right. So, now, that's the purpose. Let's get to His importance. This is Sinai to go, and this is the first instance of Him saying, I'm the most important thing. I freed you from Egypt to give you myself as the most important thing. Okay? And we've been over this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But what does David say? God, show me a rock that is what? Higher than I. Do you remember that? You remember the Psalms? Show me a rock that's higher than I. right? That's what he wants. America wants a rock that looks just like them. They want every other rock to be just like them. That's America. And that's the world. You're like, man, no, it's the world. So we all want a rock that looks like us. The psalmist want a rock that's higher than him. And that rock is what we'll call this now, Sinai. Okay? Now, we've already been over this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is recap. But he takes them to Sinai, and at Sinai, he cares about dimensions again. He's really specific. That at the base of the mountain there's Israel, half of the way up the mountain there's a table for the elders to eat and drink with me, and then at the very top, Moses can come, he can bring Joshua, but he comes to the summit alone with me. All right? He goes to great lengths to give you those dimensions of Sinai, because God's tent, the tabernacle, is going to be Sinai portable, Sinai to go. So, they are going to take Sinai with them. Eventually, it's not until Solomon's day that they'll plant Sinai on Moriah, and it will transcend to Zion. This is the idea. So, the idea for the tabernacle, as we've been over, is that the tabernacle is Mount Sinai laid down. It is an architectural mountain. This is the idea. But the significance of the mountain, as we see, the base of the mountain equals the courtyard of the tabernacle. Dining halfway up is dining with God in the holy place of the tabernacle. And at the summit, it equals the Holy of Holies. But the significance of God's tent going with Israel is because that's the whole point. God is now with his people, and he is going to begin to take over the planet. Exodus begins with them building houses for Pharaoh. It ends with them building a house for God. This is the new world. This is the new city. It's beginning. It's happening right now. So, the significance of why we see God as being so important is that he has them actually unearth Sinai and carry it with them in the tabernacle, because he's so important. He makes that happen, okay? Second, his importance. First things first. We've been over this already, but God starts in the tabernacle and he works from the inside out. He does that very counterintuitively. You'd think when you build a house, you start with the foundation and the frame. He starts with the bedroom furniture. He starts with the Ark of the Covenant, and he works his way out. And then the second thing he talks about is the table. This is not rightly how you'd think to build a house, but he's building a house of priority. Do you see? It starts with the most important thing, which is the Ark of the Covenant. And then it goes into the table. These are the two most important things. Why? Because heaven is on earth. And why is heaven on earth? So that God can walk with man. God's the most important thing. And the next important thing is our fellowship with him, because he's the most important thing. So, we've imaged this. So you go from ark to table. That's first things first. God's important, and fellowship with him is the next important thing when humanity exists. So what we've done is we've looked at the table is in the holy place at the top to the north there, and then you see the Ark of the Covenant. And the way that the temple compound was, tabernacle court and compound was probably built, this is conjecture, but it's kind of universal conjecture, is that if it were divided in half, and we'll see why that's not such a strange belief, what you'd have as the two center points is the Ark of the Covenant and the altar. And you're kind of like, well, didn't you just say the second most important object's the table? Well, yeah, but how do you get to the table? How do you enter the holy place? Except through an altar. What did Moses have to do at the base of the mountain before the elders came up? What did he do? He built an altar, he sacrificed, and then the elders, because remember, if you touched the mountain, you got killed. Right? So the altar, there's a sacrifice, now the 70 elders can ascend, right? Altar gets you to the table. That's why, if there are two items that are most prominent in the compound, it's the altar and the Ark of the Covenant. Okay? This is the idea. Now we get a little bit more complex. Are you ready to put your brain caps on? Okay. Seriously, you need to put your brain caps on. All right. Now, here's the idea. Now, you just got to hang with me here. You got to hang with me. This is worth it. You ready? Okay. It's not going to be easy, though. All right. The tabernacle is Mount Sinai laid down. God wants to communicate that as a priest is walking horizontally into the tabernacle, he's actually doing what? If it's an architectural mountain. He's ascending. That's what he's doing, okay? So what he does, God in the details, and this is connected with chapter 27 too when it gets to the courtyard. This stopped at the holy place. Chapter 27 gets to the courtyard, so I'm giving you a little spoiler, okay? But here's what you find. Look at the complex. The fence around the courtyard was 7.5 feet tall, all right? So it's like this tall, okay? It's got fine white linen in between every post, every fence post, okay? Each fence post has a bronze base. Bronze represents the earth, okay? It's not hard to believe. It's the most earth-like looking of bronze, silver, and gold, right? It looks like the earth. The top of it, of that fence pole, is silver. Silver looks like the sky, okay? So, what you have is you have a bronze base, that's the earth. Then you have a fence post with clouds, which is getting you to the silver sky, okay? So, the altar, remember, Ezekiel calls the altar a mountain. The altar was a mini mountain. It looks like a mountain. It's like a prominent, erect feature that looks like a mountain. It's meant to. So, you got the altar, it's like a mountain. It's bronze. You've got the bronze laver, also in the courtyard. It's got water in it. Remember how Eden is a mountain? And what flows down from mountains? Guys on the wilderness trip should know this, right? Rivers flow down from the mountain, okay? So Eden had a river so powerful it split into four to water the four corners of the earth. So you got this laver filled with water. You got an altar that's a mountain. The water is essentially imaged as flowing down the mountain, okay? The altar into the world. All right. So you got bronze to silver. Then what is the tent of the tabernacle? What are its bases? Okay, this is what's fascinating. They're all silver bases, except the entrance. Okay? So this is the idea. You're climbing up the mountain, bronze. You get into the tabernacle. It's got all bases. In other words, the fence of the courtyard took you up to the skies, as it were. You get into the tabernacle, and now you're in the sky. You're in the sky. Both curtains are deep blue when you get into the holy place. You're in the clouds, right? You're like a bird that's flying in the clouds. You're saying that's still a crazy thought. Until we get to the priest's garments, and they will have wings. Wings. The priests are like wings. They're birds. They're like angels. They're like in the sky, in the firmament, okay? And then what's on top of the posts in the tabernacle? What color? What material? Gold. So this is the idea. Now you're in the highest heavens when you get to the top of the tabernacle. Now remember, God, the mercy seat is his footstool. He doesn't sit on it. He sits on the angel's wings. So God's head is like the 15-foot high ceiling of the tabernacle in the gold place, in the all gold place. Even the floor of it, which is the atonement cover, is pure gold. What are the roads in heaven made out of? Pure gold, right? Okay. So, this is all imagery that you're climbing higher as you walk horizontally to communicate that you are in the heavenlies when you get in the place. But into God's place. But the big point is there anything higher than God? No. That's why his importance is communicated by height. And you think, man, that's kind of wacko. Well, here's the deal. What did the people of Babel build? Tower of Babel. What was it meant to reach into? The heavens. Now, here's what's fascinating. God disassembled that, right? But then you encounter Jacob. And what does Jacob dream about? A ladder that goes from earth to heaven. And what's ascending up and down that ladder? And what do angels have? Okay, so this is the idea. Babel attempted to get to heaven their way, and everybody's doing that right now. America's doing that right now. We're trying to carve out Eden. It just looks like hell. So God establishes his way. So Babel means the gate of God. Okay? That's what it means. Jacob looks, he sees this heaven, ladder ascending from heaven to earth, and he says, this is the house of God. Right? So God is building his house, and he does it through Jacob. That's the idea. And Jacob sets up a pillar of stone. It's nothing compared to how tall Babel was, right? But how does God always start? With a seed, with the smallest of things. And Daniel says, look, I saw a stone. And what did that stone do? It broke down every imaginable kingdom that looked so powerful, right? But it had feet of clay. Right? So this is what God does, and this is what he's doing here. Another way to understand this, because remember, it's multivalent, which means you can view it through lots of different angles like a diamond. But what's interesting, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. And I am, so I'm going to wait on that. Okay. So this tells you that God is unimaginably high. That's the idea. He's higher than all things. Number 4. Oh, this gives you some pictures, okay, that might be helpful. This is what it would look like. Now, the one thing that they get wrong in this picture is that they don't have silver as the bases in the tent. And the bases were silver. I don't know why they did that, but it says in the text that they're silver. So that's the one thing that I don't see right in this from what I've studied. But yeah, this gives you a little... I also think, like I said, the Ark of the Covenant and the altar probably would have been central in each half, and they don't have that reflected here. But that's up to interpretation. Okay, his importance, depth. What do I mean by depth? Well, I mean by as you go in, the materials get more precious. That's the idea. Remember, when God has them bring their material that they got from Egypt for the contribution in Exodus 25, he lists all the things they're to bring in order of value. So you may not have noticed that when we studied Exodus 25, but that's the way it is. He says, bring your gold, silver, bronze. Is this ascending value or descending value? Descending. Just like he starts with the Ark of the Covenant, he starts with gold, the most precious. Then when it comes to the fabric, bring your blue, purple, and scarlet. Blue is the most valuable. It came from small snails that would have been probably from the Red Sea. One snail gave you like drops of blue. You take thousands of snails to get this fabric made, and Egypt had it. Okay? So blue is the most valuable. Scarlet is less valuable, and purple's in the middle. Purple's a mix of blue and scarlet. So this is also in descending value. And then third, you've got different types of skins and sewing and that sort of thing. You've got fine linen, goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, and dolphin leather. This is the covering. The initial things are the instruments and the curtains. This is the coverings of the tabernacle. It had 4. So what I want you to see here, I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? All right. How many sides of the Holy of Holies are gold? Now, it's framed gold, so you can see the curtain in between it. But how many sides are gold in this picture? Now, okay, very good. So, yeah, it's got 3 gold sides. How many gold sides does the holy place have? 2. Descending. Do you see? Okay. All right. Do you see the difference between the curtain that breaks the holy place from the Holy of Holies and the curtain that breaks the holy place from the outer court? What's missing in the curtain of the holy, entering the holy place? What's missing from that curtain? Cherubim. Cherubim guard God's immediate space, right? We know that because they guard the Ark of the Covenant, and then they guard the curtain. Now, what you can't see here is that cherubim, this covering would be on the ceiling too. The cherubim are on the ceiling of the holy place, but they're not on the curtain going into the holy place. So what you have there is descending value from the Holy of Holies to the holy place. It's a little less holy. Okay? All right. And let me see if there's anything else I wanted to ask you. Okay. So, then you get to the outer court. The outer court is there anything made of blue? The special dye? Oh, there is. The entrance, right? The entrance. You're going into God's space, so it's blue. But it's only a portion that's blue. So, let me give you a quick summary here. The most holy place has 3 sides of gold. It has ceiling cherubim and veil cherubim. Bottom silver, top gold, most lavish. You get to the holy place. 2 sides of gold, ceiling cherubim, west cherubim, east blue. Slightly less lavish, more priests. Oh, that shouldn't be in there. That's coming up. And bottom silver, top gold, slightly less lavish. Courtyard. Plain linen, still very high quality. Doorway blue, slightly less lavish. So it's going from most sacred to less sacred. But what it's telling you is that God is the most sacred thing in all the earth. Okay, now let's go to the coverings with the width. As I said, there are 4 coverings covering the tabernacle. And here's what they look like. I'm going to talk you through each of these. The very first covering was blue with cherubim because the cherubim are guard God. This is exactly what Adam was supposed to do in the garden. He was meant to work and keep. But the word for keep is the same word for what the cherubim does when he gets stationed there. He guards the garden. That's what Adam was supposed to do. He got replaced by the cherubim because he failed. And you say, well, aren't angels higher than us? What does Paul say we'll do to the angels? Do you not know that you'll judge the angels? That's incredible. Okay, so the blue cherubim, what we'll find when we get to the priest is the priest's outfit, the high priest's outfit was made of the same thing as the tabernacle curtain, the special curtains is what you'll find. So he's equated with the blue cherubim, the first level of guarding. When you leave the tabernacle to the east, you encounter the high priest's family's tent. In other words, the guy who guards the tent, the entrance to the courtyard, is the high priest and his family. Okay? Then, surrounding the other sides of the tabernacle were the Levites. This is the goat's hair. Okay? They surround the north, south, and west. Then you have a ram skin, which dyed red, which is probably Israel. A ram is a male lamb. What did Israel sacrifice to get out of Egypt? A male lamb, and put blood over the door. So the ram skin likely is a covering, meaning that's to represent Israel. Israel surrounds all the priests. So you've got the high priest covering the door, the other priests covering all other sides of the tabernacle. Then you have all of Israel covering the priests. And then finally you have dolphin leather. Dolphin in Leviticus is an unclean animal, which likely means, and from the sea, Gentiles are frequently associated with the sea. Okay? You didn't know that about yourself, did you? They're unclean. We're unclean. Dolphin's an unclean animal in the law. So this probably represents the Gentiles. Now, this is conjecture, but it's probably something you can hang your hat on. Okay? Not only does this show how special God is in the innermost sanctum, it also shows how his message was supposed to spread. That it was to go from the priests to the Levites to Israel to the world. That's the idea. So that the world would be covered with knowledge of God like the waters cover the sea. This is the idea. Sixth, spatially. This is something that's very interesting. The Holy of Holies is exactly half of the holy place. Okay? So take a look at that. If you took the Holy of Holies, you could fit 2 of them in the holy place. All right? Now, this probably helps you understand, where did God take Paul? Into the 3rd heaven. So you see that the immediate tabernacle can be broken up into thirds. Okay? So Paul went very high is probably the idea, okay? So 2 holy holies can fit in the holy place. And then if you took the holy place and you put it in the bottom corner of the court and then took this corner right here and spread it out proportionately, as it got bigger, it would lead into the court. So what's probably indicated here is that this is meant to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But the holy place itself is without doubt the most sacred. It's where it all starts. In fact, it's so sacred that when the priest goes in on the Day of Atonement to sprinkle the atonement cover with blood for the sins of Israel, do you know that he was supposed to take coals with incense, put the incense on the coals so that the Holy of Holies would fill up with smoke? Do you know why? And he shall take a censer full of coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense beaten small. And he shall bring it inside the veil, and put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony, so that he does not die. In other words, friends, it's very possible that no one ever, including the high priest, was allowed or permitted to see the atonement cover. It's that precious. And you say, well, didn't they cover it up? There's conjecture that several priests did that, and that they walked in backwards like Shem and Japheth, covering up Noah, so that they didn't see it. It's very possible that that's the way they did it. We're not given that detail. But what this demonstrates is how sacred this space was. Only the holy people could enter that space. The common were left out. And of the common, only the clean could enter the courtyard, and the unclean were left out. There's all these degrees of approachability and unapproachability of God's presence. So friends, this is just a multiplicity of ways that God says, I am most important. Listen. Did you know, as I've said before, which direction did the tabernacle face? The door was on the east. The Holy of Holies was at the west. Do you know that a big deal is said that the tabernacle shall face where the sun rises, and the Holy of Holies will be in the west where the sun sets? Does that sound anything familiar to meditate on the law day and night? That its direction is assisting you as to its importance? That when the sun rises, and by the way, all the tents are around the tabernacle. Do you know that he specifies how their doors should open? That their doors should open facing the tabernacle. You see what God is getting at? I am it. I am it. He's telling you, he's commanding you, think about me all the time. All day to when the sun sets, and then when you read the Psalms, they say, we wake up in the middle of the night and we meditate on you in all watches of the night. You are the thing. You are the most important thing. Rich Mullins sings a song about God being his one thing. He says everybody says they need just one thing, but what they really mean is they need just one thing more. And everybody seems to think they've got it coming. But he says, you're my one thing. It's you. You're what I want. It's you. Listen, we've made a big deal about Genesis that whenever somebody goes east, they're headed in a bad direction, right? Lot goes east. Cain goes east. This is what you see. Kings from the east are bad. This is what's happening, right? Do you know that when Abram travels to Canaan, he goes from east to west? Do you know that when Israel goes into captivity, they go back to the promised land from east to west? Do you know that when Israel enters the promised land, God has them circle about so that they enter the promised land from east to west? Do you know that there's a movement in the book of Acts that shows the church spreading from east to west? Do you know that when the Magi come to Christ, they come from the east to the west? Friends, these are all just little nudges of God that's saying, I am it. I'm it. Your job is to come home. That's the point. It's the point of Scripture, to connect heaven and earth. It's so fascinating to me that we're entering this week, June, which is Gay Pride Month. Claimed. Not trying to be funny here. It's so fascinating to me that they chose the symbol of the rainbow as their own. One of the commentators that I studied, James Jordan, looks at the tabernacle colors. You've got deep blue, you've got purple, you've got scarlet, you've got gold, which is like yellow. Remember, we talked about gold being like yellow. And he looks at that and he says, you put all these colors together, it's very much like the colors of a rainbow. And then you go to Revelation 4, where John is permitted to enter God's throne room, and what is behind or around God's throne? A rainbow. And Jordan goes on to say, when God says, I will never flood the earth again, it's not that the earth obviously doesn't deserve it. We're deserving of it all the time, right? It's not that He's not going to do it. He's promising that though you deserve it, I'm hanging my warrior bow in the sky, and I won't do it again. And Jordan goes on to say that at that point, from that point forward, it's as though God views the world through a rainbow visor. That's how He's viewing the world. And that's confirmed when we get to Revelation, because it's around His throne. So God is like viewing the world through a rainbow visor. And here's what's so interesting about Gay Pride Month and the rainbow. Is that it's as though, like, I don't mean to be too crass here, but sometimes young children might know when their parents can't discipline them in public. And a really, really, really bad kid would kind of be like, I know you can't do it now, right? That's kind of what's happening with Gay Pride Month. What they've done is they've taken His image of, I won't do this again, and they've said, we're going to take our sin and we're going to say, you can't do it again. See? It's just too much. It's too much that a visor of grace is taken to be a place to flaunt depravity. This is what's taking place in our world, in our country. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're flooded with images from the Texas tragedy. And of course, what quickly follows up that is reform, gun control, mental awareness, families. It's just all of these things. And of course, families would be exceptionally helpful. A father and mother would be exceptionally helpful to a home. It's God's gift to raise it up. But listen. These are all secondary. What is needed is revival. That's what's needed. God is what's missing. You can take a kid from a single-parent home and they can turn the world upside down with God. It is God that's missing. That's what's missing. Consider the movements of the coverings of the tent. Consider. You start with the priests. You move to the priest family, the Levites. You go from the Levites to the extended family of Israel. You move from Israel beyond to the world. And just go back to Genesis and think about sin. Sin started in the Holy of Holies, did it not? With Adam the priest, correct? It started with the priest. Then it went to the Levites' family, did it not? Cain kills his brother. And then Cain is one step removed, is he not? He says, now you need to go. You need to move further out. You will wander. So you're further out. And then you trace Cain's genealogy, and what does that lead to? The world, right? So it starts with the priest, it moves to the priest's family, then he's moved further out from the garden, and then it goes to the entire globe, to where earth is covered with sin like it was meant to be covered with knowledge of God. That's what Adam was supposed to do, but now it's covered with sin like the waters cover the sea. But since it's sin, I'll make it like water actually covering the sea. And it will lead to death, because that's what sin does. And so what happens is that the tabernacle is meant to be a reversal of sin spreading to the world. And it's meant to be glory spreading to the world. And this is exactly why Jesus came. Peter puts it very succinctly. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God. So friends, when you go to God through Christ, it's not just for forgiveness. It's for all things. It's for reformation of your marriages. It's for reformations of your thought life. It's for reformations in your parenting. It's for reformations in how you eat and how you drink and how you spend your money and how you spend your time and how you spend your prayer life and what you think about and what you talk about. For those of you who are reading the devotional that Pastor gave out to several people, several men in the church, yesterday's devotional, if you read it, was on every careless word. Just listen to how the verse, the devotion starts with. Matthew 12:36. I tell you that on the day of judgment, people will have to account for every careless word they speak. Listen to what they say. Jesus spoke plainly about our idle words, yet his warning often goes unheeded. Jesus said that for every idle word, there will be a time of accounting in the day of judgment. We would expect Jesus to condemn profane and vile uses of the tongue, but idle words are things we say carelessly without concern for their impact on others. We too quickly assume that the sins of our tongue are minor sins God will overlook, yet Jesus was fully aware of the devastating nature of our words. For idle words that come from mouths give a lucid picture of the condition of our heart. What God wants our words to be infused with are His glory. That's the message of the tabernacle. That you are to see me as the all-consuming, the most important entity. And once you live in the Holy of Holies, your whole life will bleed glory. Your words, there will not be idle words. I was thinking of how many idle words I spoke yesterday. And it was convicting. The message of God's tent is to live there. To dwell there. And allow that to spread all the way to the dolphins. I'm going to ask the musicians to come.